Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar. My name is Alison Toon. I'm a senior analyst with CSA Research, and today I'm going to be talking about mastering global content delivery, the tools, processes and audits you need. Now, please feel free to ask any questions or make comments either in StreamYard or through LinkedIn, depending on where you're watching the webinar. So today I'll talk about automation and the post-localization era, some of the challenges you may be facing, various tools and automation tactics, the use of generative AI, and I'll give you a summary and some research resources that can help you. But first, let's take a look at the post-localization era and what it really means. Now, we've been talking about the localization industry, and up until last year, 2023, really the industry has been based on traditional written language services driven by human being, totally human translated. And of course, machine translation came along, and along with it, machine translation editing services or post-editing. We had a pretty steady flow of spoken language services, including interpreting. And then more recently, the advent of machine translation centric, but really services that are augmented by machines helping those human translators. And we saw the peak of this model really last year based on all of the data. The growth was fueled by those human services, and the growth was really quite linear. But then what we're calling 2023 was really the peak of localization. And when I talk about post-localization, it doesn't mean that localization is going away. It's more of a watershed moment in an industry. Like, you can think about the industrial industry and then post-industrialization. Those industries and machines and all of the development that went with it didn't go away. It's just a change in the mode of delivery. So what we are seeing and expect to see in the future is that artificial intelligence is driving the growth, making it possible, and there's an acceleration in the volumes, plus more of a merging in services between humans and machines. But you've got the human at the core, but there's pervasive AI involvement and natural language processing involved. And more, you'll see a blending of spoken and written assets. So think about the growth in multimedia, the need for more accessibility, the expanding amount of content that the world is producing each and every day, the majority of which is not yet translated, but which might be helpful for people if it was available in their language. Now, it really is not all about AI. And given the current environment, it may be a bit of a controversial statement, but it's really important to note. AI cannot do everything on its own. And certainly generative AI, such as ChatGPT, cannot yet do everything it tells you that it can. There are other forms of automation which may be more appropriate in given situations. And there may be more processes that are more efficient in human hands. And then there are other tools that are today being labeled as AI, but which are really more traditional forms of automation. And then on top of this, there are other tools that you need to use before you define your AI strategy or begin creating an automation strategy or making any changes to what you already have. And then don't forget machine translation, which in itself is a form of artificial intelligence. So it's not all about AI. And it's certainly not all about generative AI, though we all hear an awful lot about it, and it certainly is a tool in your toolbox. There are other forms of artificial intelligence that can and do contribute. Your executives might not always know the difference between generative AI and other forms of machine learning, such as machine learning and artificial intelligence, and of course, machine translation. AI and machine learning learns and predicts from what has happened before. So it predicts trends and best outcomes. It might be used to suggest the best linguist for a particular project based on the type of content, the language, and translated data such as number of errors or their timeliness. But that depends on a very reliable set of data to be able to make those predictions. Generative AI, of course, as its name suggests, generates content based on patterns in collected data. It is not magic. It can do things like summarize content. It can correct formality levels. It can create new versions for a specific locale or audience. It's based on large language models, which require reliable, unbiased training data. And then, of course, machine translation, or neural MT, is artificial intelligence. And anybody who has been working with MT for a while already has the knowledge of AI and then how important that accurate, unbiased training data is. And those are, definitions and topics that you can talk to your executives about. When they say, why can't Gen AI do everything? Well, you've got ways to explain it to them. Gen AI is, of course, one of the tools that you have in your toolbox. But before you get your hammer and nails out and start building a new house, you'll want to do a few surveys and assessments to make sure that you're on solid foundations for the future. Start with other tools from your toolkit. Content audits, process audits, risk assessments, and other evaluations are vital to not only prepare for language technology, but also to provide you with those answers that you need for those executives who do keep suggesting that ChatGPT will do everything. We're hearing it rather a lot these days. Now, you can see from this image, which was generated by a large language model or from a version of ChatGPT, it really can't do everything, no matter how detailed and specific the prompts are. But it can really help in certain areas, and it is rapidly improving. One thing to bear in mind is that AI is already on the inside of many different things that you work with in the localization industry. It's within translation and localization tools and processes. It's available for augmenting multimedia localization services through things like automated transcription, automated captioning, with machine translation for subtitles. It is providing synthetic voice, which is getting better and better all of the time. Interpreting for assisting interpreters with terminology, with pronunciation guides, and many other areas of tools that are used within not only the localization industry, but also connecting up to the processes that you need to use through content management systems, with authoring assistant, with the tools, thinking about the tools that are used in HR departments for filtering through candidates. You want to make sure that your HR team uses the right criteria for finding the best candidates for any job openings that you have. Procurement teams are using AI in their systems more and more to help identify suppliers. So again, you want to make sure that the right keywords are being looked for by those technologies. But AI really is everywhere within so many elements of software and services today. It's not brand new, it is there. Now, when we look at the enterprise and the challenges facing enterprise localization teams this year, there's a lot of pressure, both external and internal. From outside the organization, you may be getting new customer requirements that need to be met. There's more of a demand for dialogic content, so more of a conversation rather than presenting content and perhaps needing to translate something that comes in from an external customer. There is more and more regulatory pressure and accessibility mandates, so making sure that everything is accessible to anybody who needs the information. Inside the organization, there is the never-ending cost pressure. You have new sources of content. So not only is it text-based content, there's lots of different multimedia formats. You may have spoken content that you have to handle. There is an element of shadow IT, and shadow IT is where you see people using tools and services that have not been approved for use throughout the enterprise. And in the old days, that might have been somebody who was using an unauthorized piece of software. But now what we're seeing is language being made available in so many easy ways, whether it's through a free version of ChatGPT or whether it's built in to an enterprise system as part of its platform. So this form of shadow IT can be a big concern for localization teams who have spent an awful lot of time and effort building up consistent translations with on-brand terminology and making sure that everything is in the right style and voice for the enterprise. If everybody in the organization can suddenly obtain translation through their own favorite tool, that is causing a problem for the enterprise. So that is an internal pressure for localization team. And then, of course, there's new use cases for their products, services, and content, and internal accessibility requirements too. So there's a lot of pressure in both directions. And what we're finding is that the language service providers, so your trusted partners, can help with regulating some of that pressure. So don't forget to talk to them about what they can do. And if you're an LSP yourself, then think about what you can be doing to help your customers on the enterprise side. Now, at the same time as all of this pressure going on, there's the context of the amount of content that the world is producing and how much, or rather how little of it, is actually being translated or transformed to another language. At the top of this chart, there's a representation of the number of exabytes. I have no idea how big that is. I just know that it's ginormous, that is produced every day globally. And then the next line is an indication that only 34% of that is pure text. Now, I mentioned multimedia content, so there's more than that pure text that potentially could be translated. We do a load of calculations to cost down how much of this is actually being translated. And the bottom two lines show that the bottom line is an estimate of the amount that's being translated by machine translation each day. And the line above it is the human translation. And it's really a rounding error on zero. It's such a small amount that today is being translated and made available in other languages that automation and artificial intelligence, what it's really going to do is help organizations make information available in many more languages or many more forms to help many more people. So you need the automation to enable that to happen, and to enable it to happen within the amount of money that you've got to spend. But it doesn't mean that you've really got to translate everything. This is a story that I came across on the BBC website. Embedded within this law company's website was the text, "A free bottle of wine is available if you claim it." It took 3 months, that is 3 months, a quarter of a year, for somebody to find that text on their website and read it and notice that they could claim a bottle of wine. 3 months. Now, obviously, this company knew that there was a problem with their content. They knew that nobody was reading it. They just wanted to actually prove it. So, okay, that was a funny way of proving it. But what it really means is that for those 3 months, or even longer, because they had to notice that there was a problem in the first place, 3 months of the time that somebody took to generate the content, whatever it cost them to host it and keep it published, and everything else, that content was not being used. It was a total waste of effort. So before you consider using all of these wonderful AI and automation techniques to translate more and more content, think about the effort that needs to be put into creating, editing, translating, managing, supporting, and publishing content. Is it all serving a purpose? Is anybody actually reading it? And it's really important, because yes, AI makes it cheaper and easier to translate more content, but it's still vitally important that the content is useful and needed in the first place. And there are better ways of doing it than offering a free bottle of wine. I'll mention a content audit in a moment. Accessibility is becoming more and more important, and some enterprises are already aligning localization functions with accessibility responsibilities, at least at the management level in the organization. And it's especially important when you think about multimedia and events, because localization and accessibility go hand in hand, because they have similar requirements for the integration of components. Think about terminology and style. The use of sign language is an important element for accessibility. And the provision of synthetic voice can really help as well when you're translating and people need to hear rather than read. So in the post-localization world, we're seeing more and more of this blending of media and multiple modalities for delivery, meaning that accessibility becomes tied closer and closer to localization. And for the enterprise, it's something that you have to deliver. And for the LSP, it's something that you can really help with. Just think about it. What is more accessible than being able to understand something in your own language? Now, earlier I mentioned those shadow IT language activities. It means it's easier for anybody to obtain translation, whether it's a good translation or a bad translation, however you judge it, without approaching a localization team. So whether the function is built into a commercial plugin platform or available as a plugin, or within content apps such as Google Docs, translation is available everywhere. The advantage is that it makes it easy for somebody to request it and obtain it. It may not meet their needs and the level of quality, but it's easy. The disadvantage is that the organization can quickly and easily lose control over brand and quality and preferred style and voice. Now, how much does that matter? That's something that you really need to ask. Do a risk assessment of your content types, decide what is going out, what the risks are, what are the risks of another organization storing your data and using it to train their engines. Is it a big deal or not? Really needs to be taken at a high level in the organization, and be sure that you know where your content is going, how it's being handled, what the security is, and what's going to be done with it. But one learning that everybody should take away from it is that People really want easy access to language. Being able to request language help at the moment when they need it is now expected. You've got these plugins, you can press a button, you can translate it. And it may not be perfect, but people are showing that they want it when they need it. So if you're designing a user experience, keep this in mind. Another area of challenge which goes with that is this fine balancing act between making language access easy and at the same time ensuring compliance with legal and security and privacy and brand requirements. So executive sponsorship is essential, plus collaboration with other parts of the organization. Include IT, include your security and privacy teams. Talk to marketing, accessibility, support organizations, any team that's responsible for AI, and trusted partners such as language service providers and language technology providers. If you're a localization leader, you and your team may have the best automation strategy that's ever been developed, but if your partners and internal stakeholders don't fully engage, it's broken. Nobody can do it all alone. You've probably got an awful lot on your plate right now, juggling budget and responsibilities and headcounts and all of this new technology. And you need to keep on top of shadow IT. But remember that you also have access to really vital data assets that others in the organization could and should be engaging with. For example, good terminology for building the organization's knowledge graphs and ontologies, for using with generative AI, for using with large language models. You have process data for machine learning. You have long experience with large language models in the form of machine translation. So all of this enterprise AI, it's a time for collaboration and for breaking out of silos. But let's first take a look at some of the operational processes that many of you may be hoping to automate. So here we've got a traditional translation project that is not being fully automated. It typically has a lot of wasted time, and I'm sure nobody here is still doing this, right? But if you break down the steps, even if you've got a follow the sun model, there's often time waiting for the next person in the workflow to begin the working day in their time zone. This kind of project is especially grim when there are a lot of manual tasks in the process, other than the human activities of translation or interpreting. And that includes things like when you're working on content that hasn't been designed to allow for text expansion. AI can't magically fix that. It might help, but it's not going to automatically fix issues. Now, you think about this and wonder if generative AI can help with some of these tasks if built into a workflow with appropriate tools. Sure, it might be able to do that, but it would be so much better to avoid having to perform those workaround or those fixes in the first place. Think about if you are going to have to deal with a significantly greater volume of content using existing processes. The simpler the process can be, the better and the easier it is, and the less wasted time, the more speedy the process. Now, your language service provider might not be as automated as you think they are. Now, you may have seen this before in the report Process Automation at LSPs that we published late last year. The situation hasn't significantly changed since then. And this is a bit of an eye chart, so I'll just explain the things that stand out to me. We asked a set of LSPs about the number or the proportion of projects that they manage within a TMS or an IMS for interpreting projects. and only 45% reported that they manage more than 90% of projects within one of these systems. And then on the bottom right, that red bar, the question was about the proportion of projects that are fully automated. And 55% of the respondents to this survey said that 0%, so none of their projects were fully automated. And by fully automated, I don't mean the human translation and interpreting steps. I mean the project management, so the workflow, the way that projects are routed through from the client to the whatever needs to be done in project management to eventually end up with the translator and eventually end up back with the client. So that's what we're talking about here as being fully automated. Only 2% of the respondents said that more than 90% of their projects were fully automated. It'd have exception management built in, so if something went wrong, a human project manager will be notified, but only 2% were doing that. And this worries me because I know this has been possible. It's been possible to do that for a very long time. It's not the LSP's fault. There may be challenges with technology on the provider side, but also and equally, there may be problems with the content that enterprises are sending for translation. The content may not be fully optimized to allow it to process through the system more in a more automated fashion. It may require somebody to do formatting work or file engineering. Somebody may be bundling up various types of content into the same project. That means that a project manager then has to extract everything and send them in their different workflows. So you really need to have some tough and open conversations about levels of automation with your providers to find out what is happening, why it's not already happening, what can be done differently, and open up those flows of communication to find out how more automation is possible so that you can more easily cope with increased volumes of content. Now, something to bear in mind about using generative AI for translation or for assisting with translation. The data that the large public generative AI engines have been trained on have some critical language biases. English accounts for almost half of the training data. And then other European languages are adding about another 40% of that training data. There's significantly smaller amounts of training data for Chinese and Japanese, for other Asian languages, for Middle Eastern languages, and for all of the long tail languages, as we call them, or under-resourced languages. There's a tiny amount of data that's being used to train these engines. Now, why is that important? Well, a lot of the time people will say to us that, oh, well, we can use AI translation or AI interpreting to help with these under-resourced languages and to fill gaps where we've not been able to do translation or interpreting. But without that training data, the engines will fail, and they will fail badly. So if you are working with a very large set of languages and you find that you're able to automate more of the translation at a very high quality for say, some of your European languages, you may want to consider investing your savings in human translation for the languages where there's less data available today, so that we can, as an industry, start to build up the data for languages that are under-resourced right now. So earlier I mentioned audits of content and processes. And before moving to new automation, we really recommend, highly recommend, that you audit your existing content and processes. Identify the needed inputs, outputs, and what has to happen in between. So what are the transformations that you need? You may have things in place that have been workarounds because previous technologies didn't do what you wanted them to do exactly. But then audit your content too and identify commonalities and overlaps and different content types. And then once you've done that, you can assess the risks for various types of content. Which content absolutely must be translated in a secure environment by human linguists, making sure that everything is perfect, versus content that is ephemeral, that may not be used after the next couple of days, and where an error might be less of a risk to the organization. Only when you've done these types of risks, risk analysis, process audit, and content audit, should you then plan your global content revolution. And if you don't know how to do these audits or where to start, contact us. It's an area where CSA Research provides advisory and consulting services, and it's something that we really enjoy doing. Now, despite this generative AI depiction, this picture you see on your screen of a content audit, we don't stand on tables unless absolutely necessary, and we don't all wear red suits. And I'm not sure why all of these content auditors are guys, but it is something that we do. So contact us if you need help with this process. Now, at the beginning, I mentioned human at the core. We hear a lot of talk in the industry about human in the loop. We don't use that term. We say very strongly that the human is at the core of everything language. It's the human expertise that's either, it could be the professional translating the vital content, aided by automated workflows, aided by machine translation or AI-enabled processes. Or it could be a human expert applying their knowledge to training large language models, or identifying the most vital processes to automate and then designing that automation. It's human beings understanding other human beings. Yes, those responsibilities will change in the post-localization era, but trades and careers have always evolved over time. Sometimes slowly and sometimes more rapidly. And right now we're really seeing a new industrial revolution. And it's up to everyone to evaluate how the new tools can help, how they fit in with current processes, or how they may instigate a complete paradigm shift. The human needs to be at the center of this, driving it, and not just in the loop, cleaning up what the machine produces. So please take that away with you. Talk about humans at the core of the process. Value your human knowledge and human expertise, and use it to bring everything together for the benefits of all of your organizations. So this is what I've had to present for today. If anybody has any questions, let's take a look to see what we've got in the comments. Yes, Simon, thank you for your comments. You're saying it's still vitally important that the content is needed, and I totally and 300% agree with that. You don't want to be producing content that nobody's going to use. Instead, you need to identify what will be helpful for somebody, what will serve a purpose, what will make the business better, what will aid somebody to do what they want to do, whether it's with your products or your services, or if it's for government content, what will help somebody to understand what they're trying to achieve. And yes, the shift to post-localization absolutely requires systematic automation. You will not achieve this type of volumes for the variety of content that you need to process in the post-localization era without systematic automation of various tasks. And it's not just taking what you have today and automating it to make it go faster. It's really an opportunity to step back, take a look at what you're doing, look at, what was put in place because it was absolutely needed and because it delivers what you wanted to deliver. What was put in place because it was a workaround, because your old system does not do or could not do what you wanted it to do, and it's just become embedded in your process. Well, you don't need to carry that forward. What content are you working with? Does it serve a purpose? Is it meeting the person who's going to use it? Is it meeting their requirements? It's really, really a time and an opportunity to take a look at everything and find a way to do it better, not just faster, not just cheaper, but in a more human and responsible way. Okay. Another question about change management when it comes to adopting new language technologies. I would say change management is probably the most tricky part of any transformation. It's those humans again. They're in there, and they need to be talked to, and they need to be persuaded that they've got to do something differently. And change management is really about helping people to see the value in a new tool, a new process, a new way of doing things. And if you're changing, say, a large system, and an example of that might be moving from a decentralized translation model to a more centralized with a standard set of tools and processes, there may be certain teams that are much more willing and adventurous to try something new. So a way of starting your change management can be identifying those people to work with first. Then they can become your advocates. They can tell other people about how wonderful the new process is. Helping people to understand what it brings to them. And this is a time for anybody that's looking at automation or changing a system and leading that automation to say, well, this is not for me. This is for other people to use and for them to show off what they're achieving. So give them the data that they can then take to their management to say, look what I've achieved through this new process. Look what I have achieved to help the company. It can be, be shy about what you're doing yourself. Allow other people to show off for you. But change management, absolutely, it's probably the most difficult part of any transformation. Okay, and another comment about only 2% of projects being fully automated. It seems like a lot of work needs to be done here. Yes, I would say so. There's probably a lot of things that can be done quite simply, but it needs that communication between the client and the group that's providing the service to find out, what are the expectations, why is there a disconnect, and what could perhaps be tweaked or done slightly differently. And you know that your language service provider is always striving to deliver things on time and on budget and in the right way. They may be having to take workarounds to make sure that those things happen on time, and they don't always come up and tell you, what they're having to do as a workaround. As a enterprise buyer, you may be expecting everything to be done in a certain way, but you haven't asked the questions to find out and check that they're actually happening in an automated way. So it needs a lot of conversation between everybody involved in the whole process. It's the human connection that's absolutely vital. So, yes. Okay. Okay, I'm checking. I do not see any more questions in the flow, but we have a set of research that may be helpful to you, which I think we're going to post into the comments. If one of the team can do that. If they don't appear there in the comments, just shoot me an email and I'll send you a list of research that is linked to this presentation that you may find useful. So thank you all very much for your time. Okay, there's the set of reports. You can find them on the CSA Research website. Thank you all very much for your time, and I hope this was useful. Oh, a new question before we finish. When is automation perhaps not desirable? Well, when there can be different criteria. There's no point in automating something just for the sake of automating it if it's working exceptionally well, if it's serving its purpose, the process that you have in place. If everybody is happy with the results, there's no need to automate something unless there's a problem. You need to evaluate everything. If you're looking for cost savings, look at the cost of investment in the technology to do it and compare it with what you're paying today. You may be surprised that if you have to make a huge investment in new technology, it might be more expensive over the next 5 years than continuing with your current process. But then also take into account whether or not your current process can scale in the way that you want it to. If you're expecting to grow the amount of content you're producing or to develop your business into 100 more locations, you've got to look at the scalability as well. Okay, I think this really is the end of the questions. So I will thank you all, and we'll talk again soon. And don't forget to get in touch if you need help with content or process audits or risk assessments. We're here for you. Thank you.